I said, how shall I announce you? He said, however the hell you like. But you probably know him best as the last Jacobite.
Again, I do. The last few years have not been easy for anyone. We had the fear of a pandemic. We had lockdowns. We had restrictions and rules. And we bounced from that just when we thought we might be able to get back to some degree of normality. We bounced straight into a cost of living crisis. One that could have been avoided, but the powers which probably shouldn't be decided to cut off cheap gas, to say we didn't want Russian energy. And then we had the war in Ukraine. If that wasn't bad enough, just over a year ago, on October the 7th, they broke out of the largest open-air concentration camp in the world, and that led to the events that we're witnessing now in the Middle East. And it's not that I want to agree or disagree with anyone, but I think we're a lot closer to disaster than maybe some people understand. It was the Austrian general Clausewitz who came up with the term that war was an extension of politics by other means. Well, peace needs to be an extension of politics by all means. Most people have heard of the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm not a fisherman, but I'm going to do a reverse fisherman thing here. If I hold my hands this far apart, that's how close we were to nuclear Armageddon during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Looking round this square, I can see statues to almost everyone, but there's a statue missing. How many of you have heard of a man called Stanislav Petrov? Stanislav Petrov should have a statue in every city, in every town, in every village in the world. Like Glenn, I'm an old cold warrior. And back in 1983, NATO had an exercise. It was called Able Archer. And it was to test the readiness of NATO's nuclear weaponry. So we had a simulated launch. Problem was, we forgot to tell the Russians that we were doing it. The Russians, Stanislav Petrov, was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet army. He was the officer in charge that day in the control room for the Soviet Union's nuclear response. He only had one job. As soon as he detected NATO launching, he was meant to hit the Soviet button. The reason that all of us are here today is because Stanislav Petrov waited. Phone calls were hurriedly made. Oops, we're sorry, we meant to tell you it was an exercise. that so scared our leaders back then, Ronald Reagan, that's what started the disarmament process. So in 1983, if we were that close to nuclear Armageddon with the Cuban Missile Crisis, in 1983 we were that close. Do you know where we are today? That close. That close. Everything is on a hair trigger. The Russians have got their nuclear forces on a hair trigger. One long-range missile, one mistimed drone, one false flag. That's all it's going to take. Netanyahu is itching to attack Iran. Itching. If that happens, forget a cost of living crisis. Petrol will be, God knows, £100 a gallon, maybe more. If they close the Straits of Hormuz, which will be the first thing that happens, you will not be able to heat your home. If the bomb goes. I live not very far from Coolport. I'm lucky. I'll barely register a flash and that'll be it. Hallelujah. Here in Glasgow, you won't be quite so lucky. You'll see the flash, you'll feel the heat, and then you'll slowly die from radiation sickness. We're that close to the end of the world, people. That close. It's about time the lunatics in charge understood that we, the people, simply want to live. We deserve to be able to bring up our children, to provide for our families. And we deserve to do that without the fear of nuclear Armageddon. We've got to do something. And today's the start. Today, we make our stand. Today, we say, not in our name, never, for we stand for peace. Thank you.